Welcome to What's in a Game. On today's show, we're going to check in with the Denver Nuggets stars playing in the Olympics. But first, we're going to ask, did the Nuggets actually have the worst offseason? And then finally, we're going to talk about Kevin Durant weighing in on how basketball should be played on our little philosophy corner. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back to What's in a Game. I'm Grace. I'm here with my co-host, Will Jones. How are you doing today, Will?
Doing great. Just watched Jokic versus Puerto Rico, and he did really well. He got a soundboard double, one assist shy of the triple double, which, if you were making any bets on him getting there with his points, rebounds, assists, you just missed out by one. So, very sorry about that.
I think it would be really interesting if somebody was betting on Jokic triple doubles in FIBA play because the game is like shorter and he hasn't been like rebounding quite as much in these games, in the exhibition games or whatever. He's like always one shy on something. Not getting as many assists in particular compared to with the Nuggets, which I find interesting because he's largely playing a similar role with Team Serbia playing him at the five. But yeah, that was a fun game. That was a nice, comfortable blowout, a nice get right game for Team Serbia after they got smacked by Team USA in
Mm-hmm.
their first group play game. Just a couple of news items first. The Phoenix Suns signed Tyus Jones to a minimum contract, and the uh, Memphis Grizzlies signed Luke Kennard to a 1 year, I believe it's an $11 million deal. So he's coming back to Memphis Grizzlies. Those are the biggest sort of off-season news items trickling in, as the days of free agency start to wane. What are your thoughts on the Tyus Jones move in particular, Will?
Well, my first thought goes to the contract just because it was a minimum. So we had some Nuggets fans that were maybe bemoaning the fact that the Suns got a player of that caliber. We can talk about how good he is or not because I'm definitely low on him, but I get how, he has a good assist to turnover ratio. He wanted to be a starter potentially in the NBA, and he's been one of the more solid backups. But sometimes when I watch him, I question how good he actually is. But whatever. We can talk about that. But still would rather have Russ over him. But it's like, what teams would have known that he would have got a minimum? Because if that was the case, they could have gone and tried to get him right away. But you had to wait for that market to dry up. And he kind of just got what was left, whether that was his agent messing up or not getting the word out right or handling the business properly. Who really knows? I don't think it's going to be a huge needle mover for the Sun just because they have him and Monte. I think they're both a little too small. So I'm not like that worried about it. But who knows? Do you think he's going to help improve the Suns' offense as the Suns' detractor? Or how do you feel?
Yeah, so I mean, the Suns were, I believe, 25th in turnover rate last season. I've cited this before because they were worse than the Orlando Magic in that sense. And unlike the Orlando Magic, they went out and tried to address their need for a floor general type point guard by not only getting Tyus Jones, but also, as you mentioned, signing Monte Morris to a standard contract, probably as a backup point guard type of role, and also Colin Gillespie, as we talked about earlier, is on a two-way contract with the Phoenix Suns now. So, despite all the posturing at the end of the season about how they didn't really need a point guard, they went out and signed three pretty solid, guys to have available for that spot. The thing that
Yeah.
stood out to me as well was the contract. I think the reason that Tyus Jones signed with the Phoenix Suns over anyone else, because any team could have given him a minimum. Phoenix is seen as a good team. But second of all, they offered him a starting spot. All of the reporting about this signing, including by Tyus himself, indicated that Mike Budenholzer wants to make Tyus Jones the starting point guard. And, there are things that teams will say to get a guy to sign with them, right? And I don't know how this experiment of Tyus starting. So let's assume that two of the three most expensive players on that roster are also going to start in Devin Booker and Bradley Beal. If Tyus is a starting point guard, then they are locked into a starting role with probably Grayson Allen coming off the bench. That does make them incredibly small, as you say. And I feel pretty comfortable actually in saying that I think Tyus is probably the best perimeter defender that they have on that team, which is not a good
Yeah,
thing.
that's
It's not a good thing.
him and
Tyus
Gillespie and
Jones is,
Monte are all way too small and not good at defense. So
and
I
then
don't
you
know
have
why
Booker and
they.
Beal. I do think that it's interesting that they went this route in trying to get a point guard. If at the beginning of summer, if someone asked me if Tyus Jones was in the Phoenix Suns price range, I would have said no, in large part because I thought maybe, just maybe, the Orlando Magic would address their need for a point guard this summer, and they didn't at all. And obviously, they had cap space to spend, and they didn't go that route. But honestly, I thought that if a team like the Magic didn't want to use their cap space to sign Tyus to at least something close to what he wanted, because he wants starter money, right? But I thought if another team wasn't willing to give him starter money, I thought the Wizards would just extend him and, retain the asset, right? Thinking back to how they got Tyus Jones, it was part of the three-team deal that resulted in Kristaps Porzingis getting to the Boston Celtics. So I'm like, wait, okay, you didn't take the first round picks in that deal in the way that all the assets were being shuffled. So I would have thought, especially based on how they treated Kuzma, that is, a different caliber player than Tyus Jones, but it seemed like they wanted to maintain their assets. They extended Kyle Kuzma last year. I thought they would do the same with Tyus if Tyus didn't get signed somewhere else, because why not? There was not a market for him to be a starter anywhere. So Phoenix swoops in, says, you're going to start. They have an incredibly small backcourt already, and they're getting even smaller now. I don't know how much longer that's going to work out. Let me ask you, if a month into the season, the defense just craters because they're even smaller than they were before, and Nurkic just has too much to handle with trying to clean everything up on the interior. Let's say he is healthy for that stretch, and they have to make a choice, because Booker's going to start no matter what, but maybe the choice is Tyus or Beal. Do they kind of renege on the, seems like a promise that they made to Tyus that he'd be the starting point guard, or does Beal come off the bench making supermax money?
I would say that you should not tie yourself to having to start Tyus. Like, you definitely need an option to have him be a backup because I don't think he is a starter in the league. I mean, there's a reason why no one wanted to grab him to be a starter. I'm sorry, Tyus. You're a great backup, but I don't know that you're ever going to get to starter potential. Is the spacing around Kevin Durant and Booker and all that going to provide him some opportunity to showcase his skills more? Maybe. I don't think it's going to elevate him to starter no matter what, but it could give him more money just to like be a backup on like maybe a contending team or something. Although what contending team has the money for that if he's raising his value? I don't know. I would rather start Beal just for the upside. You have a lot of firepower with Durant and Booker. Does having just Tyus playing around them and just facilitating in some ways give you more value than having Beal? And then Beal on the bench is good too because he's like very explosive offensively. I don't know. I mean, I think they should try both and see. But
No, I agree with you. My sort of concern, if I were a Phoenix fan, which I most definitely am not, would be that they don't try both because of the politics of it all, right? Oh, you're benching the supermax player for the vet minimum guy that you just signed. But yeah, on the concept of the prove it deal, I think Tyus is really good. I think he's one of the better bench players in the entire league, but he's in this weird in between spot where I don't see him as a starting caliber player on a good team, right? Obviously, he started for the Washington Wizards, mostly because, like, yeah, if you're going to be a point guard at his size, you have to be someone that is the caliber of a Kyrie Irving, a Steph Curry. I don't see that level of potential for him. Even like a Jalen Brunson type, but he's just like a really solid point guard, right? I don't know how he could sort of prove it to the degree that he needs to, because I think everyone knows he's a good player. Like, part of the problem is, you talked about how like contending teams wouldn't have the money to pay him. Bad teams don't want him on there because he is a good point guard and can like accidentally make some lineups kind of good that maybe they don't want them to. And maybe that's the reason the Washington Wizards didn't want to extend him, because they wanted to make sure that they were in the tank for Cooper Flag. But if Tyus in particular decides to be flexible, one, it would defeat the whole purpose of like holding out for starter money all summer if he's just going to go to the Suns and then be willing to go to the bench and be seen as a bench player, and that's going to determine his market next summer. But it would give the Phoenix Suns a lot more flexibility. They definitely have real point guard, playable point guard options now. And I do think that that's a big deal, not just because of the turnover rate, but just overall their offense, particularly in, slowed down environments. Like everyone knows the Phoenix Suns were one of the worst fourth quarter teams in the entire league. Having someone who knows how to organize an offense just available will help with that. And I do think that generally speaking, it is a value deal to get that kind of guy on a minimum.
I think they should trade Beal for some better defenders and hope that Monte and Tyus can be the good point guard and,
You think they're going to get stuff
diversify
for Beal?
themselves. Yeah, you can trick someone to, especially an Eastern Conference team, to like really buy into his offensive game and like get at least one defender or something or two or I
Yeah.
don't know. Yeah,
They
they should
need wings.
diversify.
They still don't have them. Yeah, but now they've got lots of backup point guards and a real backup center in Mason Plumlee. So,
A lot of Nuggets rejects over there. Plumlee, Nurkic, and Monte. Wow.
oh my gosh, no comment. Next, I want to talk about the ESPN survey about ranking the off seasons. Yeah, they said that the Nuggets had the worst off season.
Yeah,
Well,
Tim Bontemps.
do you have the vote in front of you?
I don't have the exact vote, but basically Tim Bontemps on ESPN surveyed 18 coaches, scouts, and executives and asked them to kind of give some votes for who had the best offseason, who had the worst offseason. The Nuggets ended up getting 6 votes for the worst offseason. It was then the Bulls and then the Clippers. The Clippers received 4 votes and the Bulls received 5. The Lakers, Knicks, Pistons got a vote too, which is kind of weird. How could the Knicks be the worst offseason?
They lost Hartenstein.
Yeah, but they got Bridges and they re-signed OG. That's something. I think it's kind of absurd. It's more good Nuggets hate, chip on the shoulder motivation and fuel for us fans and the players. We didn't lowball our second best player on the team with an offer and then lose him.
Or nothing.
Yeah, lose him for nothing when you're supposed to be the I'll pay anything team and then lose him to Philadelphia because you basically screwed up. I mean, I guess we decided not to make an offer for KCP is what it seemed like. That's where the dust settled. So we can argue about whether or not that was true, but that's the direction they chose. I posted a poll just on Twitter where people voted for like a grade A through F, and most people said they'd give it in the C range, which I think makes sense because, we had some good and we had some bad. And I think the truth kind of lands in the middle of our offseason. Like, I don't think it was horrible, but it definitely wasn't great. We've talked about it a ton on this show, and we'll maybe go more in depth on the whole offseason in another episode. But I definitely don't think it was the worst. These reporters even questioned the Nuggets' moves when we got Bruce Brown and KCP and called it a salary dump. And now KCP is, known to be a good, like, championship contender role player. A lot of people didn't
Yeah, so
realize that
much
at the
so that we
time.
couldn't afford him.
Yeah.
So,
So now we've gone to the completely the other end where we had the worst offseason because we lost him.
right.
It's kind of funny, but it's definitely I would rather have KCP and be able to do some stuff. But what are your thoughts on the Nuggets and if they had the worst offseason?
I don't think that the Nuggets had a good offseason. I thought they had a slightly negative offseason on net. And maybe I would have said it was neutral if Duran hadn't gotten injured.
Yeah,
Right? Because I do think that the draft pick was one of the best things about the summer. I remember like just saying it at the
yeah,
time. I was
so
like, oh,
excited.
something good. That's great. But I do think that losing KCP, it's not just losing that player. I think part of what the detriment to the team is with losing KCP is losing some versatility along with the players that we did add in Russ and Saric, because KCP can just play in any lineup. Like he can defend and shoot threes. If he can do that, you can play in any lineup. And now we're sort of left in this scramble mode as a fan base where we're trying to figure out like how can this work Whereas, honestly, if they'd kept KCP and did everything that they did somehow, right, it would have been tough on the margins, especially because, like we talked about, to get Saric, they needed to use the taxpayer MLE. That would have required being under the second apron. So that just would have been difficult. And I recognize that it was difficult to keep KCP. But if they had managed to keep KCP and did the things that they did, I actually would have given them just an A for the offseason. I do think that most of this, in terms of being like the most votes for worst offseason, does come from like, oh my God,
Haters.
Denver's offseason so bad. Like actual haters. And I don't know if everyone's even conscious of it, right? Because you,
Hmm.
like you said, it's like media and executives that they surveyed for this. But yeah, like everyone wants to know, like, how do we beat the Nuggets? So it's better if the Nuggets just beat themselves by getting worse, right? So it's wish casting in a way. And they might be right that the Nuggets did get slightly worse. The other thing is, right, the other two teams that are with them, like you could say the Clippers were like also a contender, even though they're not necessarily the same tier as the Nuggets. And they did lose Paul George for literally nothing. But then you look at the contrast that to the Bulls that lost DeRozan for nothing, and then they trade Caruso for Giddey, and people can feel how they feel about the value in that swap, but it seems like the consensus is that they lost in that trade, or that the Thunder won in it. But the point is, I'm actually surprised that the Bulls got more votes than the Clippers there, because one of those teams was supposed to be good. The Bulls were never supposed to be good. So the Clippers were supposed to be good and got substantially worse. The Nuggets are held to an even higher standard. So I think it's kind of like everyone's getting graded on a curve, just like your fan base would do, just like Nuggets fans have been doing all offseason. Like, we do think that we've had a really rough offseason, and I do feel like a little bit of a need to push back against people saying that we had the worst one, but it is
Hmm.
rough, and part of that is because of the expectation of the team. And so when the expectation is championship, all of those margins matter a little bit more. So while I think most of it does come from hating on some conscious and some subconscious levels, I also think that some of that is a fair criticism for the position that the Nuggets are in, where they have this all-time great player. They are a really good team, a team that could win a title and should be trying to win everything on the margins, but seems like they're eroding on those margins.
Let me ask you a final question just to kind of wrap this up. And we don't have to go super in depth on it so we can talk about Jokic and Jamal. But if I propose to you that if we just trade KCP for a guaranteed, and I know this is hypothetical and this may not happen, but hypothetically, a guaranteed healthy AG, Jokic, Jamal, and MPJ for the playoffs, and all you had to do was trade KCP, would you take that deal?
Right, but like, who am I trading him to? I want to know what the deal is.
It's not like
Does it
it's not
expiring
an actual
contracts?
player trade. It's just like the idea of losing a 3-and-D role player on your championship team construction to guarantee that your top four is going to be healthier and theoretically play more consistently in the playoffs and be more fresh. That's essentially what we did, right? You're losing KCP and signing
Right,
backups.
the deal is to be able to sign Saric, right? I would say if that was the trade, then great. Yeah, like I'm all for making sure our top four players, our core guys, are fully healthy going into the playoffs and like rested and ready to go. But that's not the trade, because you can never guarantee that. I get the idea of like what you're getting at here, which is that, like, okay, we had to be able to get Saric
Yeah, or just
so
like,
that he could
yeah, front
like
court
spell
depth.
Jokic more in the regular season. Well, that's what it is though, right? Because that's the only move that would have required
Yep, to lose him.
not having KCP on the roster,
Yes,
right?
yeah,
So I think that's the part that people are struggling with, because it's like, but KCP is a better player than Dario Saric. Part
yeah,
of the reason that I've said before, I think the Nuggets will be a better regular season team. It's not just because we got Saric. Like, I think we
yeah,
got just a little bit more. Like, I think adding Russ does help with that because of his just like constant energy and all of that stuff too. But I think that it's like a tougher sell in the playoffs, particularly for our top four guys, because the versatility around them feels reduced when you consider that like Saric is probably not going to be playing all that much in the playoffs, you
yeah,
know, should we get there, and
yep.
we will. But no, I get it. And I do think that's why so many people gave it that C range grade, is because it feels like, eh,
Hmm.
you know, But yeah, that's all I have to say about whether the Nuggets had the worst offseason.
Right.
Here are the group play standings. The United States are actually currently playing South Sudan, and they're beating the brakes off them in that game. So that's going to shift the Group C standings a little bit and just kind of bump Team USA up to the top. So before we move on to talking more specifically about the players, I just wanted to just give everyone an update. So far, I believe right now we can say with certainty that Team Canada should be moving on to the quarterfinals. Technically, if they lose their last game, and then Spain and Australia, who I don't believe have played each other yet. So only one of them could actually move on. So yeah, I think that means that Canada is guaranteed a quarterfinal spot right now. Germany and France are moving on because they're the only teams in their group that will have won 2 games, right? So that means they have not played each other yet. So I'm looking forward to
That'll be
the
fun.
Germany-France matchup. Right. And then Group C, the US is basically they're about to secure their spot by beating South Sudan today because they've already beaten Team Serbia, which is the only other team that could win 2 games in that group. So even if they lost their last game to Puerto Rico for some reason, the US would be good for the quarterfinals. Team Serbia, they have to win their next game, but it doesn't matter by how much because of the other teams that are in the sort of running for the wild card spots. Because you could have Australia, Spain, who only one of them is going to win that game, but one of them will. So one of those teams, Japan or Brazil, and then maybe South Sudan, hopefully not Serbia, in the running for one of 2 wild card spots. It's going to come down to the point differentials that will be determined by the last games that they play this Friday and Saturday.
Right.
So that's actually going to be a really interesting day for the potential wildcard teams.
Yeah.
Right now, it looks like it might be kind of tough for South Sudan because their point differential is positive right now. But after this game with the USA gets uploaded in there, maybe not. They're probably pushing to try to shrink the margin of loss in that game right now.
Yeah, and Serbia really upped their point differential after that USA loss and played well today, so that's good to see for them.
Serbia lost to Team USA by 26 points. And then I think it was almost a 40-point margin. So they are definitely in the black after that game. Besides that, I wanted to talk about a couple of the sort of 50-50 matches that we've seen so far in group play that were just kind of like, oh, okay, that was a close game, but so-and-so pulled it off. And the first one that we saw of that was actually Team Canada versus Team Greece, right? Greece has Giannis. Canada has SGA, Lou Dort, Dylan Brooks, Jamal, etc. And that game was interesting to me just because it started to look like it was going to be a blowout for Team Canada. And then Greece actually, in the second half of that game, was able to battle back and make it, I think it was a 1-possession game at some point in the last 2 minutes. But they just couldn't, keep up that level of execution. But that was a dramatic game, I think, because you saw everything about why Giannis is so hard to stop, but also some of his limitations, particularly in the half court, and what that means for the Greece's limitations in particular. Yeah.
But with Greece specifically, I think I predicted them going to the knockout round and Spain actually being the one that wasn't going to make it. But it looks like I'm going to be wrong on that. It looks like Spain, they've already won a game, so they might be going through because they beat Greece actually the other day. I thought Giannis would be able to kind of be talented enough to really push them over the top, but it is FIBA ball, and you need a lot more teamwork and a lot more depth and just overall quality play that I am a little bit concerned that Greece doesn't have right now. Like Voya said on our last episode, you can build that wall in front of Giannis a lot easier with the no defensive 3 seconds and the compressed spacing. So it's going to be a little bit of a challenge for Greece.
All right. Anything else you wanted to say about the standings?
No, let's jump into the actual games with Jokic and Jamal and talk about our 2 superstars. No shade to one, but one is looking like their usual self, and there's questions about whether the other one looks like his usual self. So we can talk about that.
I hope one doesn't look like their usual self.
Yeah,
Just
I
let
guess
him
that's
be
true.
Jamal's usual self.
That graphic was going around with about Jokic with his like on and off where it was 81-81 when he was playing, and then when he wasn't, it was, three, they were outscored 29-3. It was more competitive in the first half. It was usual Jokic trying to set up his teammates, working really hard. His 3-point shot kind of became a discussion point after that game, but ultimately it was just Serbia couldn't really muster up the firepower from the perimeter to compete with the United States, especially after Kevin Durant was shooting 100% from the field.
Katie somehow heard my slander, even though our episode wasn't even out yet. So
It is kind of funny, like how one game is going to now change the perception of KD.
sometimes in certain environments, he's not as good, but he's known as he's the Slim Reaper, right?
Yeah.
He's a mid-range efficiency master. He's very efficient from three. He just doesn't take them in volume, but he took a lot and made a lot in this game,
Hmm.
for the time. I think it was 5 of 5 from three in like 17 minutes versus Team Serbia. He was coming off the bench.
I wasn't too worried about Serbia after that. I had worried the night before that this game might not be super competitive. They were, I think, really trying to be aggressive with the defense and the ball pressure.
Yeah.
And it's just that level of play and energy required to stay in the game on defense and on offense, which their best looks were coming from cutting and, Jokic kind of hitting them on back cuts and just like a Steph Curry falling asleep or someone falling asleep and the cut and getting them a nice shot. That's hard to sustain running around that much on offense and on defense. And eventually, yeah, they just couldn't really do it. So I'm a little bit concerned for that matchup if they do end up playing in a final. But
I mean, anyone should be concerned about a
yeah.
match with Team USA. They are a
Hmm.
team full of matchup problems.
Yes.
It's every star that is on their team there to be the focal point of an offense, there to be the one bending a defense to their will. So they're a matchup problem for everybody.
Yeah. You want to see from a Nuggets perspective flashes of Jokic looking really great, looking like the best player of the world, which we are getting still. He looked like that in the friendly matches. He looks like that against the USA and especially against Puerto Rico, where size was a huge advantage for Serbia and the rebounding. So I don't know if there's specific
Jokic had
points.
15 rebounds through 3 quarters versus Puerto Rico today. That
Yeah.
was that was a get right game on the glass if I've ever seen one. And it's nice that you mentioned that. He doesn't have quite the same size advantage versus Team USA, but I also thought that because of his positioning, he was also not really in a place to, win all those contested rebounds that he usually wins because he wasn't like there to contest them versus Team USA. And it's one of those things that might be my confirmation bias because it's my sort of pet analysis, but I genuinely think that one of the best ways that you can really hurt a Jokic team is by keeping him off the glass, whether that is dictating where he's going to be on offense with how you're defending him,
Hmm.
or off the defensive glass as well by just being crashing offensive glass more or something. I don't know.
Or like trying to pull him out of the
Um,
paint or something.
right. But yeah, he only had I think 5 rebounds in that game, and he played way more than he did versus Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
But it was also like the lack of like a true size and such. But honestly, I have to give LeBron a lot of credit for that because he did a really good job of, I've talked about this before with LeBron. Like he has to do, particularly when he plays power forward, like he has to be Aaron Gordon basically, right? Just everywhere, athletically, like getting rebounds, boxing out, all of this stuff, and just working really hard to make sure that someone like Jokic isn't able to get second chance opportunities, et cetera. Not that LeBron was really like crashing in for a bunch of offensive rebounds or anything like that, but particularly the defense, it helped to limit Jokic's offensive rebounds by being a good defensive rebounder. And yeah, I don't even want to say that it was the way that Team USA was guarding Serbia that forced Jokic like out of the paint more on offense. Like we've talked about this when it comes to like his 3-point shot and why I don't really think it's that big of a deal. But part of my thing with it is that I don't want him taking a bunch of threes because on offense I want him inside because he's going to be available to win all those contested rebound battles for those offensive rebounds on misses that other people have. Whereas when he misses his shot, there's like not a chance in hell that another one of these guys on Team Serbia is going to win the contested rebound from like Anthony Davis,
Yeah.
right? It has to be Jokic inside there. And I think that's one of the things that really stood out in this game is that they felt like they needed to resort to Jokic needs to go out and shoot these shots. And my problem wasn't that he was missing them, it was that he was taking them in the first place. I wasn't really a big fan of that process versus this kind of team, right? Versus another team where maybe they have a bigger size advantage on the wing like they did versus like Puerto Rico. I wouldn't have minded as much.
His 3-point shot is becoming a talking point, and it's a matter of should he even take them? Should he try to be more selective about his 3-point attempts? Is it something where he can just get the 3-point shot back and it'll just be there when he needs it? We're going to talk about Kevin Durant and the little debate he had about FIBA rules later. But I thought it was kind of interesting in that context where basically that debate centered around random basketball versus like set play. And I was thinking about your point where you're talking about the importance of his shot. And it's not like we draw up these specific set plays to get Jokic a 3-pointer and that's like pivotal to the offense, right? So it's like,
Sometimes we do, but
yeah.
yeah,
But it's
pivotal.
not often. And I'm like, just his 3-point shot, sometimes it's late shot clock, like the Sombor 3 over 80 in the playoffs with the Lakers. Like that was kind of a late shot clock. And he was like running and he made that miraculous
Yeah,
shot.
these
And
weren't
that was
good
awesome. Yeah.
shots. These aren't the types of shots that you judge a shooter's ability on.
Yeah. If his shot's not on, how concerned should we be about it? Because, like you said, his work inside's way more important. But, if it's there, that's great. That helps a lot, right? How much do we have to rely on it? How many attempts does he really need to keep defenses honest and not clogging up the paint?
I will say, I think when it comes to his 3-pointer, I would just compare it to like with Christian Brown, where if he's going to take them, I would prefer that he take them in rhythm rather than hesitate.
Yeah.
Like sometimes Christian has the tendency to, because it takes you out of rhythm. And that's something that like a quote unquote non-shooter does. Like I wouldn't classify Jokic as a shooter. I wouldn't call him a non-shooter, but I wouldn't classify him as a shooter because shooters don't hesitate. They have the same footwork and the same release every time. But that's not what he does. That's not his role in the offense. It's never been like a big part of his offensive game. And so he is going to hesitate because he's like, oh, should we just run a DHO here or whatever it is? The nice thing about Jokic, though, is that when it does come to those late shot clock situations, he is like, "Oh, we just got to get a shot up," and
Yeah.
that's sometimes when you get the best attempts from
You
him
can't even think
because he's
about
not
it.
thinking about it. He already knows we don't have time. I just need to get shot up, and so I think that's an issue. And we did see him hesitate on like a couple of just like a pump fake in the corner where it would have been open, but then he like waited. And it's funny because we're gonna talk about the same thing with Jamal in just a little bit. Before we move on to Jamal and Team Canada, I just wanted to point out a little bit with Bogey or Bogdan Bogdanovic. He didn't really look great versus Team USA. Didn't look super comfortable. He's been kind of
Hmm.
passive, missing some wide open shots, but I'm more concerned with like the process of it.
Hmm.
And the only reason I bring him up because we did see some guys like Micic have like a really rough game versus Team USA and then have a nice bounce back versus Puerto Rico is that Bogey he didn't really stand out versus Puerto Rico. And the times when I noticed him outside of a couple of catch and shoot threes, it was just like, you don't look really comfortable driving into the basket. I would like to
Hmm.
see the finishing just be a little bit better because there were just some like wild shots thrown up like at the rim that I'm like, that could have been finished. And that kind of thing. And I wonder if it has anything to do with the one exhibition game that he did miss, where it was like, minor injury, but mostly I'm sitting him out because it's a precaution. So I just hope he's okay. Maybe he's just ramping up. We're going to talk about ramping up a little bit more in here with other players, but that's just like something to monitor because he is a real X factor for Team Serbia, not just because of the outside shooting, but that helps a lot too. But because he can be a little bit more dynamic off the dribble than I've seen him be in these first two games. And it would be nice to see that because like Voya said, Micic is their best like point guard. And
Hmm.
you don't necessarily want to be in a position where that's the ball handler you absolutely need to rely on to kind of reach your ceiling.
In the USA game, the non-Jokic minutes were a huge problem. Nuggets fans are used to that. And Jokic sat a long time in the third quarter, which was really nice. And he still ended up with almost a triple double. at the end of the third quarter, so that was pretty amazing. Milutinov was good when he came in. He got some rebounds. He finished at the rim a couple of times, which was really nice to see because they need that production from him. Whereas he more struggled with that versus US, which is understandable because they have the bodies to kind of defend that in that unit. They have elite defensive players to come in that unit. It's kind of cool for the world to see that, Serbia is probably maybe the second best team in the whole tournament right now, I'd say. So
Yeah, and
we
the
can,
US still
yeah.
beat the brakes off them. So that just tells
Yeah.
you how good this Dream Team 2.0 is.
Yeah, but otherwise, like, you see the same kind of Jokic things you see. You see long outlet passes, you see amazing rebounds, you see some nice post scoring. We're probably not going to put a ton of clips in this episode just because NBC and the Olympics are kind of cracking down on that. And so it may not be up in our YouTube episode right now, but please go to my Twitter and, Grace's Twitter and get her threads on the game. Yeah, and Bogdanovich, you have a good point, and he is similar to Jamal, where people are wondering if he's like injured or if he's not right. He isn't fully healed from the calf strain because Jamal also is not looking super comfortable. But I didn't see the game live, and I was kind of
Hmm.
tracking Nuggets fans' reactions just by like following you and other people on Twitter, and I saw some mixed stuff. Ryan Blackburn even said he
Can
liked.
you wait? Which game are you talking about?
I'm talking about Canada versus Australia.
Okay, so they've played just, for the audience, Canada has played Australia and their first game was versus Greece.
My biggest takeaway from watching Jamal versus Australia, I was expecting to see like a really bad game from Jamal where he's either like forcing it or, just like standing around kind of, which you saw some of. Obviously, he's not going to be as on ball when you have SGA on the team, who he played with sometimes. When he came in versus Australia, they were playing smaller and they were just really forcing the ball to Trey Lyles, like to just like get those points. So it's kind of like that contextual matchup reasoning why Jamal wasn't necessarily like getting shots up because he only finished with 5 points. And so you're left thinking like, did he only have 5 points because he had a bad game or like, what's the deal? I just think like there was reasons why he didn't score that many points. And it's also FIBA ball. Your points are going to be lower as it is. So I just wasn't as concerned about Jamal as some people were because I just don't think Canada's treating him like he's Jamal Murray on the Nuggets. I think like he's kind of come in with this mentality that I'm kind of a role player. I'm maybe like the fourth or fifth offensive option, depending. And he's not like trying to be super aggressive. Where if he was, we may be seeing different kinds of results if he was really like trying. He did have a kind of cool pull up three, but otherwise his shot is not super convincing at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think the difference between the Greece game and the Australia game was actually quite noticeable, especially like you can see the progression from how he looked at the end of the playoffs to in exhibition play. Actually, I think in exhibitions he looked worse than he did at the end of the playoffs, which was why I think everybody was so concerned then, in part because he missed an entire exhibition game because he was still like ramping back up, and Canada only had three. Most of the other countries that we talked about had four or five exhibition games, at least that were, broadcast. So Canada didn't have that many, so we were like worried, like, is he going to be able to ramp up? Like, why does he look like this? And it's one thing to sort of give a guy a pass, like it's summer play, not everybody's ramped up, all this stuff. But when you're on particularly a team like Team Canada, or you can talk about if like someone was on like Team USA, you have the contrast of other NBA players. It's like, well, they all also just ended their seasons, and you know, not you can give him also the injury pass on top of that. But I think the sort of excuse of, well, everybody's like ramping up, blah blah blah. It's like, well, everyone's baseline seems to be a little bit higher than yours right now, so let's try to raise that floor. But I did actually think he looked pretty good, like physically, in the game versus Australia. In particular, he was moving really well off the ball. I actually think he's been pretty good at that, even through exhibition play, where I thought he looked maybe like the worst of anything that he did the last 8 months. He was moving well off the ball, trying to get open, all this stuff. But like I've said before, Canada doesn't have a lot of good passers. I actually think of anybody that gets significant minutes on this team, he's the best, whether it's primary or connective passer on that team. And so part of it's like they don't see him, part of it's like the ball is like swung like way
Mm-hmm.
out of where he got to get open. So that's not like blaming the other players on Team Canada. That's just like why he's not getting shots up. I actually think that
Yeah.
he's moving quite well to get open to be in position to do that. Not like ACP or an MPJ for sure, where that's like their whole job. I don't actually see too much of him just standing in one place, unless it's a play particular for SGA and Dylan Brooks, where it's like, okay, we're calling an ISO right now, so everybody just
Yeah.
stay where you are.
Exactly.
But he's been coming off the bench, I believe, in these first two games. So
Mm-hmm.
not even the sixth man, because I believe he's coming in after Nikhil Alexander-Walker. But in their game versus Greece, we had some not ejections, but disqualifications because Lou Dort and Dylan Brooks and Dwight Powell all fouled out before the end of that game. So Jamal was closing. Canada had to close super tiny, right? Because without Dwight Powell, like they really don't have that many options at the forward. And in this game versus Australia, who likes to play quite small and fast, we'll talk a little bit more about them. They play quite small, so Canada was actually had some minutes where it was kind of RJ Barrett at the 5, and Jamal was able to keep up. Okay, when Canada goes small, are they able to take advantage of the things going small? I don't want to see, Jamal has a tendency to like walk the ball up the floor, whatever it is. He was not doing that for the most part. And like I said, the playmaking. He had a couple of like rough turnovers versus Greece in the first game, but in the game versus Australia, 5 assists,
Mm-hmm.
0 turnovers, and there could have been even more if just some guys had made some more shots or whatever it is. But I will say there were some moments, particularly when it came to the shots at the rim and on drives, where I'm like, okay, you're moving better than you were before, but it's still not like you don't see the same kind of burst. There's not a lot of pick and roll in the offense that Canada is running. So he's got to create separation for himself kind of in isolation and with off-ball movement and that kind of thing. And I think that he's not quite up to the level that I'd like to see from him. It wasn't terrible, but it just wasn't great. Like if the standard for him is to look like um an all-star would in the summer, right? Which is not, peak, but just like or do you look like you're moving well? Are you able to get to your spots? Just look comfortable. I don't think that he was always at that level, but defensively, he looked great in that game. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't even see his rebounds. That's always something that Malone is tracking. It's like Jamal's best games or his most engaged. Like you can tell when he has high rebounding numbers. And I don't even know how many rebounds he had in that game, but he had 2 blocks. He was really good in isolation defense, really like strong in the post, and he gets really like fired up. He had a couple of plays like that versus Greece, but I thought the level of engagement and impact on that end of the floor was a little bit more consistent in the game versus Australia. So that was really nice to see because that's just another indicator of like where he is athletically. But like you said, the 3-point shot is like what's going on here, especially catch and shoots, right? This has been
Mm-hmm.
an issue since exhibition play. Well, since before exhibition play, as we saw in the playoffs. But his catch and shoots are just too slow, and the FIBA line is shorter, so defenders are able to recover to him faster. And he just doesn't look comfortable when he does have open shots. So he's often like trying to pump fake and drive. And I think that like the defenders in FIBA have just they've gotten wise to that. Maybe part of it's because they watch his film from the regular season. That's just pretty common for him. I'd like him to look more shot ready on those
Yeah.
catch and shoots. That's something that could really help him get his attempts up and also just look like he's gotten more comfortable off the ball for sure. But he did have, like you said, that pull up three. That was really nice to see. That step back. He shot like the highest on like step back threes last season of any guard over some number of attempts. And I'm just like, can we see more of this, please? And he had there were a couple of these like Jamal shots, right? Like he had the one where he sort of backs down Patty Mills and then he makes like this weird sort of like trick like two-handed push shot in the lane, and then he has another one where he's like coming off of movement, like comes off a pin down, catches a ball, whether it's on an out of bounds or whatever, and he goes for that little baseline fadeaway midi. And those are things, and he like cashes it, right? Those are things when I watch other players try to do them, even good ones, right? Unless you're like a Kevin Durant type. Like that's often a brick because lots of guys are like comfortable getting to their spot and whatever and pulling up. But it's not always easy to like get to your spot, be able to catch at the right angle, set the footwork right and the release so that you actually make that shot. And he makes it so often. And I'm just like, this is something that's really special about you, that you're able to make these type of shots off of movement, despite largely being an on-ball guy. And those are the kinds of things I want to see more of. And he looked so comfortable. Like, he'll have those moments, right, where he reminds you of like, oh yeah, this is Jamal. But then others where, he's like struggling a bit to like get by guys or like whatever it is. But I am happy that, like you said, he's not, forcing it too often when he doesn't have an advantage or whatever it is. For the most part, he's playing the role of facilitator on this second unit, even when he's often next to at least one other guy that would be like a point guard, not a combo guard, so like an Andrew Nemhard or
Yeah.
Nicky Alexander Walker doesn't play point guard, but he's not he kind of was in the exhibition games in particular, like doing more initiation, not so much in these first two games. So it seems like they've kind of ceded that to Jamal. He has played some minutes with SGA as well. So that's just interesting. SGA
Yeah.
drives, Jamal shoots. Hopefully some of those shots can fall eventually. But yeah, he's playing facilitator, and that's kind of interesting to see because yeah, he's off ball, but he's also on ball quite a lot more than I expected.
Canada was like full court pressing Australia at the beginning of the game, which I think is interesting because you just don't see that a lot in the NBA. And you would think, it made me think that Canada is trying to utilize their depth as well because they have a lot of NBA players in comparison to other teams in this tournament. And Jamal rested a really long time in the second half. And it was kind of interesting to see that rotation of guards where it's like RJ Barrett or Nikola Alexander Walker or Nemhard, SGA, more like defensive lineups. Jamal has been resting for a really long time. He can come in and be super fresh and try and, punish Australia, who's now tired from playing the whole game and being, they don't have as much depth on their team. That was partly why I thought Jamal's getting less playing time, getting less shots. There were times where Dylan Brooks didn't pass to him. There was times Nemhard didn't pass to him. Whatever. Like we can be people can see it as like excuse making or whatever. I just think that they're not treating him as like a number one. Obviously, he's not going to be a number one with SGA. He's just not like the offensive like scorer that some Nuggets fans might be used to. So I'm not as concerned about him playing with Canada. And also, like, what is the realistic likelihood that he would be in shape right now after the offseason where he had the injury? How much time did he have to heal from that and like rehab it and then play in the Olympics? Because I almost feel like he would wait to like get in super shape after the Olympics when he has more time.
So what I will say, and I think what a lot of people would counter that with, is that Kevin Durant strained his calf, I think right before exhibition play started. I think he played one exhibition game on it and then sat the rest of it, came in the first game at the Olympics and made an immediate impact off the bench. Just being able to make shots and like use his length and like be a player, and didn't look like he missed a step at all. I think that's a fair count. It's one of those things where it's like we give a lot of grace to players that otherwise are consistent. They have an injury and whatever it is. But Jamal has not demonstrated that ever. So I
Yeah.
think it's fair for people to question like, right, like, okay, yeah, but you're never consistent. So like, yeah, we would give you like credit or like cut you some slack because X. And yeah, you could say like the 2023 playoff run. What about that? It's like, well, that was a really long time ago and we're worried about you now. So like, can you give us something that would illustrate that you're going to be, ready to go when the season starts? And like, I get that, and I'm not one of those people that is like expecting Jamal to look even like he does like regular season with the Nuggets on Team Canada, because yeah, SGA is the number one guy and all of that stuff. So I tried to think about what is the expectation, or like what would make me happy. So it's not that I'm upset right now, because like I said, like there are some good things and some bad things with Jamal. Like he's clearly not at, even 100% of what you would want to see in the middle of an off season, which is, way below where you would be to start a regular season, but still like, okay, you look solid and you look, again, comfortable getting your spots. Like, don't look labored, right? He's not there yet. But what I'd like to see is for him to be comfortable getting to his spots, and maybe some more efficiency. Like, okay, just make some shots. Like, the stuff that you're seeing from some of these other guys playing for their national teams over the summer. And yes, he is coming back from an injury still, it seems. But I guess part of it is just like, well, what is the timeline for when we can start to have like real expectations for how you're
Yeah,
playing?
that's what I'm like
Um,
getting at.
but the question is like, what is that timeline? Like,
Yeah.
is it another 2 months on top of the 2 months that you've had since? It's just like this stuff starts to build up. And I'm not saying all of this to be like to illustrate that I'm particularly frustrated with it, but I can understand other people being frustrated with it. And there are, even for me, like some like boxes that I still want to be checked this summer
Yeah.
in the Olympics for me to feel, oh yeah, I feel good about how Jamal's going to look next season. Like, I
Yeah.
don't feel good about how Jamal's going to look next season yet.
I'm not trying to like generalize all of Nuggets fandom and journalists, but most of the
Right.
concern that I
Yeah, I think
see
everybody's levels of concerns are different, and then
different,
it
yeah.
gets
But I think most of the concern is valid. Obviously, there are people who are like trolling on Jamal, or maybe the jokes go too far. Most of the concern, I think, is fair. Like, I'm not even trying to say that, like, if you're worried about Jamal, you're being completely crazy. Maybe I'm just being too, like, optimistic because I think there's still time after the Olympics. It makes sense to me that the Olympics would kind of be like a distraction to him being in super shape. Because, like, I'm just going to be honest, he doesn't look like is very passionate about this Olympics. And I don't know if it's because he's hurt or like still dealing with stuff, or he's just there because he's just trying to be there. Like, I think he likes playing for Team Canada. He wants to compete. He's a competitor. Him being selfless, so to say, and saying, I'm fine with SGA being the guy, or I'm fine with Nemhard maybe putting up more shots than me. We're all selfless. I'm just going to, do my part and do the best I can for this team. It's very like noble of him. We talk about him always being like a bright light merchant. Is the Olympics enough for him? I don't know. And I wouldn't blame him if he was like, not really. Because, I'd care more about the NBA personally if I was an NBA player of his caliber than the Olympics. But the Olympics is a cool honor to play in. That's great. Like, everyone probably feels different about it. So I'm hopeful that there's still time. We have to hope that he's in shape coming into the season because Calvin Booth and them were talking about how it's pretty hard to get into shape once the season starts. Like, you're always behind. If he comes into the season not looking like what we want, then I'll probably be more concerned then. And then if he has a bad season and a bad playoffs, then I'll talk about that then. But right now, I'm not like at a point where I'm like, we need to start thinking about Jamal's future or whatever. There's still so much time. But we do want to see flashes of this. I'm just like, it is just Olympic basketball at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think just the last thing that I'll say on it is we're already thinking about Jamal's future. We have been
Yeah.
since the
Yeah.
news of the max extension that has yet to be, decided upon. The endeavor to like be in shape and all of this stuff. I think that I've grown a greater appreciation for the fact of how much of a constant commitment it is, to the point where if I knew, if I could like read Jamal's mind and he was thinking what you just said, where it's like, well, get in shape after the Olympics, I'd be more concerned, because it'd be
Yeah.
like, wait, you still don't get it, because like look at LeBron, like he never like goes out. Like, I'm sure he has some nadirs in his conditioning regimen, because you literally cannot do the things that it takes to be at peak all the time. Like, it would destroy your body, right? So you have to have there are some fluctuations. Every NBA player has an off season. Every NBA player has a ramp down and a ramp back up. But that baseline can't be like here. It has to be
Yeah.
like still in frame, right? And I think that's what people are, at least the reasonable ones that have reasonable concerns about Jamal, are a little bit worried about, because they're like, well, gosh darn it, your baseline is too low. Like, we'd like to see it be
Hmm.
a little bit better so that we can feel good about, like, even if you're not 100% whenever the season starts, or like whatever it is. I just want to see him look how he looked at the beginning of last regular season, which like wasn't amazing,
Isn't a
right? Like,
low.
they were
Yeah.
coming off they had clear championship hangover, but it was like he was comfortable getting where he wanted on the floor and like getting the shots he wanted, make or miss, like whatever. Like, I don't care about that. It's just like looking comfortable on the floor. I think that's for me like what I want to see to be, like I said, happy. And I'm at like a 3 out of 5 right now, which I wouldn't consider happy, because that's like a
Yeah.
C.
I think it would be
um,
hard to say anyone could be happy with it because he has so much more he could give. And I do see from that
yeah.
perspective is like, you don't want him pushing it off. Would there be enough time where he comes off this season where he had multiple injuries and it was like a pretty grueling playoffs for him because he's playing through injury? You're going to want to take a break and try and heal a bit, but then you got to go like start playing with Team Canada and doing whatever that schedule is. Was there even time for him to be in shape to a degree that could be like promising or like be a positive sign? Because I'm like, I don't even know if there wasn't enough time.
Well, yeah, I think that that question comes down to like what is the, I guess, accepted standard for the things that say an NBA player is doing to keep in relative shape even while they're injured. Or are they just doing nothing, right? Like I
Yeah,
don't think
I don't
either of
know.
us thinks that like these guys are like me when I get sick where I'm like, well, I'm just gonna let everything go. I'm like sitting on my couch with Cheetos and watching like Days of Our Lives or whatever for a couple of weeks. Like I think there's still like things that they have to do to like maintenance wise. And it's the
Hmm.
stuff that we hear about that like even Jokic does, even, whether he's lying about touching a basketball all summer or not last year, there are things that we know he does with his weightlifting or whatever it is, just his baseline. It's a little bit different when somebody's injured, but I'm sure there are still certain things that you do because you can. There's other parts of your body you can work out. There's certain aspects of your diet that you can obviously maintain and all of that stuff. And this isn't a Jamal specific thing. I think it's more like I would actually like to know like what is it that players do when they are at different points of the season, at different levels of progression when it comes to like healing from an injury to stay in shape because like their bodies are so valuable. Like they can't afford to really like just let everything go.
Yeah.
Um, so that would actually be a really an interesting discussion to have.
And I was hoping, like, if anything, this Olympics could help him to be in shape, whatever that process is, just because you're playing, you're out on the floor, you're playing with
Right.
players, you're competing. So hopefully that just adds into whatever it is he's doing. And maybe he's still in the process. I don't know. But there's still games for Canada to play. We'll see how it goes. I think part of it is he probably just maybe doesn't know how to exactly fit with these types of players. I mean, all these players are used to playing with the teams that they play in a majority of the year in their NBA teams or FIBA teams. Yeah, we'll just see how Canada does, and we'll keep monitoring this story. It's part of why following this Olympics is so fun because we get to watch Jokic and Jamal and see where they're at.
But before we moved on, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to RJ Barrett, who looks amazing in FIBA again, because he was great last summer. He looks amazing again this summer. A beast in transition. He's actually making really good decisions in the half court as well, finishing well around the rim, all the stuff that you want to see from RJ Barrett. So just nice to see that young of a player who has struggled, to this point in his career, just got traded in the middle of this last season, continuing to thrive, at least in this environment. And hopefully that can carry over to the season as well.
I was kind of skeptical of RJ Barrett, but hey, look at him go.
Okay, so we want to talk about all the rest of the NBA players, or most of them anyway, that have been participating in the Olympics and talk about whether their level of play has been hot or not. We definitely have some thoughts on this. So we're going to start with Team USA. And Will, I'm going to ask you about LeBron James. Has he been hot or not?
LeBron's been very hot. He's
That's going on Instagram.
Hey, I mean, I know as Nuggets fans who are listening to this may not be the biggest LeBron fans. We talked about him on last episode about how he might play in FIBA ball. What's adding to like his level of production with Team USA? Is it the FIBA environment? Is the role? Is it the roster? Is it whatever? I think yeah, he's just doing really good. He's very cerebral, which works with playing around a bunch of other really smart players. Pretty physical, like that one drive to the basket against South Sudan. And I like seeing him play with this type of talent just because we get to see how well he fits basically with everyone. He's a Swiss Army knife, and his athleticism's gone down, but his IQ has always been there, so it's able to carry him. They don't have necessarily a ton of pure point guards on this Team USA besides like Halliburton and stuff, but he hasn't been playing. So LeBron's
Right.
kind of in that main role, which I like for his game and playing with Team USA because he gets
Yeah,
to
he
show
gets to
some of
play
that off.
point forward.
But you had another good point about why you thought he was doing really good.
Oh gosh, LeBron's doing well in FIBA because this is a standalone tournament. This isn't an 82 game season, and the games are 40 minutes instead of 48 minutes. So he doesn't have to play as much. And so his old man body that, is better than like either of ours, frankly.
Yeah.
Uh, Best conditioned athlete on the planet, probably, can sustain being able to do all of the things. Like we talked about how on this team, LeBron has to be the, point guard and the hub of the offense, in addition to the Aaron Gordon, the garbage man, the cleanup guy who has to grab rebounds because Embiid. Actually, we didn't talk about this, but in game 2 versus they're playing South Sudan right now, and actually that game just finished and the US did win, by the way. While we were recording, Anthony Davis started at center, and LeBron and AD start next to each other. I think that the reason that AD is able to be so effective, and he's a really good rebounder in his own right, even at the center position, but having LeBron there next to him on that front line helps out a lot, particularly on the glass. And rebounding and boxing out and like defense are really where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
So the fact that the game is shorter and that the tournament is shorter and you have more time in between games, like they have 2 rest days after each game right now, at least in group play. That's a big deal. And again, not an 82 game season, I think allows LeBron to, we always talk about how on any given night he could turn it on, but he can't really sustain it for something like, a 7 game series. The next round of this is going to be single game elimination also, so he won't have to worry about that. And the games are shorter. It just means that he can actually turn on any given night, and maybe every given night in this tournament with this particular format. He's the second oldest guy playing in 5-on-5 basketball in the Olympics this year, actually. And that's crazy because I want to know who the oldest one is because LeBron's pretty old,
Yeah, I was
right?
just thinking, who
But
is
that's
that?
something that we noted is how much older the players that are going to be playing in FIBA for all the international teams are going to be than you would see on, say, an NBA roster.
Oh, I guess Tarasi, she's 42 years old. Are they
Oh,
counting
she
women?
is? Oh, maybe. Oh, maybe it wasn't just men. I need to go back and check the stat, but it might be that. I didn't realize Tarasi was 42. Damn,
Apparently so.
she's really good. She
Yeah.
doesn't look it. She doesn't move like it.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's really cool. Okay, the next on this list, and this is an easy one, so I'll give it to you. Kevin Durant, is he hot or not?
Yeah, Kevin Durant is blazing hot. He is molten lava, right? He played, I believe it was 17 minutes versus Team Serbia in that blowout win, coming off the bench. And I believe he was the second leading scorer for Team USA in that game. He had 23 points, I think, before the sort of garbage time half of the fourth quarter started. But yeah, he was just on absolute fire. Serbia absolutely does not have the kinds of wings that you'd need to guard a Kevin Durant, these like big lengthy wings that can at least sort of like bump it a little bit. That dude had a calf strain a couple weeks ago. He doesn't look it right now. He didn't look in that game versus Serbia. That was his first game back in weeks either. He's a guy that moves in a way that defies the laws of physics for 7-footers.
He had 14
Yeah.
points against South Sudan, 2 of 2
Yeah.
from 3, 8 of 9 from the line, so a lot of free throws for him.
Durant coming down the floor at you in transition, that's going to be a layup. He's not there as frequently as, say, like a LeBron, just because of his role. And I don't think he like gets down the floor to like attack off the catch as often as LeBron does. But that's going to be a layup or like a 90% 8-foot jump shot if you try to like play off him. All right, well, I got to ask you, Joel Embiid, the former NBA MVP, who Team USA courted heavily to be on their Olympic team, hot or not?
You have to give him a nod on this. He is just got benched. Hopefully it was willingly and not Kerr
That's why you
going.
had to give him a nod? Was because he got benched?
Well, it's including the reasoning why he got benched, just because he's not been playing well. Like, he's been turning it over. The things that he does for the Sixers is not what Team USA needs him to be doing for the starting unit for the United States, where he's like a front-facing scorer. He's not a connective passer. He's not, at least on the USA, being like a defensive anchor. I think AD serves better to be like a better defender and like prioritizing that role over what Embiid does. Embiid's whatever can be fine on defense because he's so big and theoretically athletic when he's healthy. So he can like do some things, but he's not like an elite level defensive player all the time, especially in this environment surrounded with so much talent. But it's just he hasn't done anything really to show that he's hot. So
Yeah, I actually just double checked because I thought maybe, if this is a blowout versus South Sudan, he'll maybe play at some point in the second half. But yeah, Embiid didn't play a single minute in that game. It's interesting. They clearly didn't need him, right? And we talked about the game versus Team Serbia. This was a 26-point blowout in that instance, but Embiid was actually a -8. He was the only player for Team USA that lost his minutes. So
but this is leading to larger discourse of people debating Embiid all time, and he's only a top 5 player in the league, and whatever. It's really funny.
I'm going to ask you next about Josh Giddey, who has been the focal point of Team Australia. Hot or not?
I think he's hot. Not actually hot, but from a basketball standpoint, pull up threes, being like creative, I think. And he's big, so it's like sometimes defenders are having a little struggle with him on offense. He's not like a tiny ball
Right.
handler. So he can do some damage out there. Like he's not just like a scrub or anything like that.
Nope, Josh Giddey's not a scrub.
He is not a
I
scrub.
do think that it's interesting you point that out, right? We've talked in the past about the things that OKC might be giving up when they trade Giddey, right? Where, they played him at shooting guard. He's like the second best rebounder in the starting lineup. Maybe a reason that Dagnall wanted to play him as often as he did, in addition to the playmaking. But we talked about how Australia plays pretty small, right? Jock Landale playing at the
Hmm.
5 as he's the starting 5 for Team
Yeah.
Australia, I believe. Pretty undersized, or very undersized on the wing and in the front court. And then Patty Mills coming off the bench, like he's going to be undersized even by FIBA standards for a point guard. But Josh Giddey actually gets to weaponize his size against players at that position in FIBA. And I saw like really everyone on Team Canada having some issue with him at different points throughout that game. So it's really interesting to me because there are lots of issues with Giddey's game that people can criticize when he's playing with OKC, but some of them are things where some things have to do with like the system and whatever, and the fact that he can't really shoot that well. But some of the concerns, like his level of aggression, particularly in transition and things like that, like it's not there at all in FIBA. And I'm like, could you at least bring this over to the NBA? Because I think this would alleviate at least some of the things that the concerns that people have about how you play and how you can like fit a team around you. But yeah, with Team Australia, like he is the engine of this. They play with a lot of pace. You talked about how Team Canada wanted to full court press them. I think part of it was to try to slow Australia down some because they play
Right.
so fast on offense, especially with Giddey on the floor. And it's not just him. He's not like a slow, like methodical, like walking the ball up and trying to like probe to get a good shot. Like they really do play with pace, and a large part of that is um, him, and he's so decisive with his passes. It's one of the things that I think OKC missed in some of the minutes that he sat in the playoffs versus Dallas. But that's the kind of thing that just like keeps an offense humming even like after it's been initiated too. So I think he's been really good in FIBA, and he's one of the reasons that Australia, I think, has the best chance of coming out of Group 2 between them and Spain. But we'll have to
Hmm.
see the
Yeah.
result of that last game. And then, it'll come down to point differential. Maybe they can be a wild card.
All right, well then let me ask you, Dennis Schroeder, hot or not?
I think Dennis Schroeder has been pretty hot. I'm not gonna lie. He is the orchestrator of Germany's offense, and I actually think they look quite poor when he's off the floor offensively in particular. He's really good at knifing into the paint. Still needs to work on the finishing at the rim, but most of the time he'll be able to spot the overhelp quickly, get the ball where it needs to get to, whether it's the big or spotting up for shooters on the wing. He plays with pace. He's been defending his butt off, although I will say when they played Brazil yesterday, he was going under on a lot of screens, some lazy switches. I think that Germany was having a championship hangover moment after they won the World Cup last year. I'm like, but this is the Olympics. This is not the time. But they managed to pull that off in that game, and Dennis was a big part of why, especially on offense. We saw even in that exhibition game versus Team USA last week that he was a big part of why it was even close. But yeah, I think he's been good, and Germany has as good a chance of any as any team to either take out Team USA or finish in that silver spot this summer. I don't think they would be able to do it without Dennis. So we'll see how they progress throughout the rest of this competition.
All right, I'll ask you again on this next one because you are familiar with FIBA Fournier. How are we feeling on Evan Fournier?
FIBA Fournier, very, very hot. He's been so good in like every facet of the game. He's getting the ball where it needs to go. He's moving a lot off ball. He's hitting shots off of movement. He's hitting shots off the dribble. He's defending really well. He's forcing turnovers at the point of attack. And I'm just like, what is going on here? This is a guy who couldn't get minutes at all on the New York Knicks on a team that was bereft of backup point guard depth
Mm-hmm.
before he got traded to the Pistons. And he actually did play some for the Pistons, and they're not a good team. So I can't really tell you too much about like the overall impact there. But he's been great for France, giving some shooting around Wemby and being that like supplementary, as it turns out in FIBA, he's that do-it-all role player guy, and he's kind of like guard Batum right now, just kind of like doing good things at moments when they really need it, whether he's making or missing shots. So FIBA Fournier, he's been really good. We saw in that game that went to overtime between Team France and Team Japan, down the stretch of regulation, it was actually like it looked like Japan was kind of like they're done, and part of that was because Fournier had hit a couple of really big threes. I think one of them was coming off a pin down, and one of them was off the dribble. Where I'm just like, oh my gosh, dude, veterans are gonna vet in these FIBA competitions. It was crazy. Then obviously Japan took the lead, and then they blew the lead at the very end, went to OT, and of course, if you're going to go to overtime against Team France in Paris, you sold. So that was a problem, but that was a really fun duel actually between Evan Fournier and Yuki Kawamura, who is the only reason that Japan was even in that game in the first place. Like you said, that was a game that you didn't really expect to be close, particularly given the size disadvantage that Japan was at. But those two guards, they really brought it in some critical stretches in that game. All right, our very last hot or not. Will, I wanted to ask you about our very own Victor Wembanyama.
This might be the hardest one because the others were kind of obvious, I think. This one, it's kind of like, what is your standard for Wemby? Still so young. He just hasn't really shown up like a projected best player in the NBA all time has played. So because I'm kind of annoyed with the Wemby hype, I'm going to say not.
Ah!
He could be
Will
doing
is
so
trying
much
to
more.
clickbait.
He could be doing so much more. He scored, I think, 10 points in the first half versus Japan or something like that, and then he didn't score for almost the entire second half. He did have a great overtime. He made some threes, made some blocks. It was amazing. But he blocked Yuki Kawamura. He goes up to Wemby's kneecap. So yeah, I'm not super impressed by that block. I don't know. I'm just trying to make a case for saying not for Wemby because I just want to see more from him. Right now, I'm just like, whatever. And I think France, not super high on them from what I've been seeing.
Yeah, I think that last part is right. Like, I think France is only going to go as far as Wemby can take them. So far, he's been fine. Like, he's really the reason that they're in the class of teams where you didn't expect that Japan game to be close, but it ended up being close. And part of that was because you had a pretty quiet second half, I would say. A lot of people pointed out that France is really weak in their guard play compared to most other teams in the tournament. And I do think that matters for bigs. But, you just want to see a little bit more of his impact on that end of the floor. Defensively, no questions about it, right? He's getting the blocks, he's getting the deflections, he's getting guys to like steer out of the paint when you think they otherwise have an open lane. He's getting back in transition to get like crazy transition blocks, all of the things that you want to see from a guy who you expect to win, 10 defensive players of the year in his lifetime. or something, right? He's staying with every wing. I don't think I've seen someone like take Wemby from the perimeter, drive in, and then be able to score on him. He's been pretty positionally sound so far in the tournament, so that's nice to see. But yeah, otherwise, like there hasn't been anything with him that has sort of impressed me. Like, oh, he's so much better at this thing that he kind of struggled with in the regular season, or oh, he's got this new skill that he's working with. I think we still see some of the same issues, like when he tries to like post up or something, like he doesn't have like the strongest base, and so you can kind of disrupt those kinds of shots a little bit. I will say, just to put a really big positive of how he's been playing is, like I said, you see all of the energy, particularly on the defensive end. He has been something of an Iron Man this last season, because you saw him in his rookie year. He played 71 games out of 82, and he was
Hmm.
playing 29 minutes per game, even with all of the load management that the Spurs were doing. He was able to absolutely like destroy the rookie wall, right? He like zoomed past Chet in that rookie of the year race, and he was doing crazy stuff down the stretch of the season on both ends of the floor. And now he's playing in the Olympics for his national team. It's a really intense process. I believe France had at least 4 or 5 exhibition games, in addition to a couple of the ones that weren't broadcast. And now, obviously, group play has begun, and France is a team that, theoretically could medal at this competition. And so that's just a lot of basketball to be played, a lot of minutes adding up. And he hasn't really had a real break, but you don't really see it on him. He's not like, doubling over, like hands on
Hmm.
knees. There's no defensive possession where I see him like taking that possession off, whether he's a roamer or he's on ball, right? He's always trying. And I think that that is something that we have to commend him on, because it's especially difficult for bigs, and young bigs in particular, to manage that energy expenditure, because your body uses up more energy than other people's bodies. There's more pressure on your joints just constantly, and you would otherwise get tired faster. And yet he's somehow been able to figure out a regiment that works so that he's never, you know, totally gassed and all of that. So that's really cool to see. I hope he doesn't like burn out as the tournament goes on. I don't see any reason that he would, because like we said, it's not like he's doing a bunch of crazy stuff where you're like, "Oh wow, like
Yeah.
he's expending a lot of energy right now." Constantly doing his job, especially defensively. And maybe we want to see a little bit more from him on offense. We know that he's capable of these highlight plays and all of that. So nothing worrying. I wouldn't say not. I would say hot, because I think that he is carrying a team that is otherwise not really of the same caliber of other teams that I would expect to medal, but I think France has a chance just because of him.
I mean, I wouldn't say that he's not hot. I have one choice, hot or not. So, so we're gonna talk a little bit about Kevin Durant and some of his comments on Twitter, going back and forth with some fans about FIBA rules versus NBA rules. So Kevin Durant was responding to some Twitter personalities. Not shocking for Kevin Durant. That's why we love him or hate him, I guess. It says, so there was a user who said, please NBA adopt more FIBA rules and let us see the best really think the game and play the game like it's meant to be played. And that's something we talked about that on our last episode, where, the rules are different than the NBA, and there might be some stuff that we want to carry over to the NBA and see how that goes. Kevin Durant responded to this by saying, I swear y'all just be yapping. What rules you want to see, man? The user responded, I want to see the 3 seconds back, and that's it. Yeah. So he wants the defensive 3 seconds to be removed from the NBA, I think is what he's saying. Keep the threes the same, so I think that's the length of the 3-point line. Can't knock off the rim, that's dumb. So he doesn't want the goaltending rules to be the same. Kevin Durant said, if you want to eliminate the defensive 3 seconds, then the games will be slower. Do you want to start on that point? Do you have any thoughts about like how the game would be slower just because the paint's clogged up? There's less like
Right. I think
room
that
to.
when you're forced to pass out, if you have no defensive 3 seconds and guys can just camp in the paint, it takes a little bit longer to find a shot on a given possession for your team. So the possessions themselves might be longer, which would make the game slower, because you don't get as much volleying between the two teams. But I think that like the game being a little bit slower is whatever. The the speed of the game is why I think I'd be for or against defensive 3 seconds. Like, if I was somebody that wanted that rule, it would be more for the highlight athletic plays, particularly inside.
Hmm.
And if I want defensive 3 seconds, it wouldn't be to make the game slower, it would be to make defense, easier to play.
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit more intuitive because, like, people are currently, like, tap dancing in and out of the paint trying to, time their help right and all of that stuff, and that's just, like, kinda weird.
Jokic got a
Yeah.
couple blocks today in the game just because he was just sitting in the paint and, positioned himself around the rim, and it
Yeah.
made it a little bit easier for him to be like a rim protector that we don't
Maybe
always
we
see.
should just make it more time, like, maybe it should be 4 seconds, like, that could make a
Hmm.
pretty big difference if you just have a little bit more of a buffer.
That'd
I
be
don't know
interesting.
that it has to be 5, but I think that'd be just interesting to see how just adding another, like, second
Second.
length that people could be in there,
I try that
um,
rather than just
but
like, removing it completely.
yeah,
And I'm definitely
eliminating
not at
it.
the stage where I'd be like willing to do that right now. But, anyways, KD was going back and forth with this individual. Basically, the crux of this is that Kevin Durant said, the beauty of basketball is not calling all them sets, but playing off instincts and letting the talent dictate the game, getting out in transition, driving and kicking, playing random basketball. If you want a trick play every possession like it's football, that's not why our game is beautiful. So
I thought this was so interesting, there were so many layers here.
yeah, Kevin Durant, he's kind of known as like a pure hooper. He just wants to play. He's a
Just wants
pure
to hoop,
scorer. He's one of the
just wants
best
to get
scorers,
buckets.
playing the beautiful game in Golden State and just being a happy basketball player. And he seems like he's still in the pursuit of that, though. He looks pretty happy in the Olympics right now, which is kind of fun to see him like smiling after these like performances. But this is this interesting debate between random basketball and, organized set play basketball. That was something we even talked about in our playoff reactions because Jamal said in post game interviews versus the Wolves that it was a little too much random basketball and not enough organization. Yeah, it's like reading and reacting is definitely a part of basketball, and it is a beautiful thing.
Wait,
And
Jamal said after the Wolves that they had not enough organization?
yeah, after one of the games, it was mid series where he said a little too much random basketball, not enough organization. So after game two, Jamal was asked about his calf and if that was bothering him. He tried to like kind of play it off, said he felt good enough. He said he's not going to make excuses. Everyone's playing through something. And then he said, we weren't organized, and that's partly my fault. Too many little empty possessions, especially against the number one defense. Too many empty possessions playing right into their hands. We're a great random basketball team. We play great off the field and the flow, but we've got to be a little more organized. That was one of the most key factors for him, is what he said. So it kind of gets back to what Kevin Durant was saying, where it's like the basketball, the random feel, and the flow is a great like state to be in, especially when you play with Nikola Jokic, who like he's so good at decision making and reading, and it keeps you a little unpredictable. But part of what a lot of people are talking about right now too, on the counter side to that, is that the Nuggets got a little stagnant. So I can see it like they're not totally separate. And this is something that Kevin Durant also said. You can randomly set a screen. You can randomly back cut. You can randomly make a pass to the open man. So it's not like these things are both mutually exclusive. You can run pick and roll with Jokic, and then from that, part of it can be random, and Jokic can do what he does best, and
Yeah.
create and create opportunities. And maybe the Nuggets relied too much on that organized set play of the pick and roll in hopes that the random basketball would
Yeah.
be enough to carry them. So you
Yeah,
always have to find,
that's where I agree.
yeah, so you have to find a balance between that, right? I don't even know necessarily that FIBA basketball demands more set plays.
Yeah, that's where I disagree with Kevin Durant, actually. So I think that part, like this discussion flows from, oh, is it the fact of the discussion, the defensive 3 seconds that makes it so you have to have more set plays to get good shots versus playing random basketball? I actually completely disagree with that. I think there are a lot fewer set plays that I've seen in these FIBA games compared to the NBA. And I like whether that's good or bad. Like, I don't think that that is related, like the fact of like the FIBA rules making it so that there's more less random play and um, more set plays, more organized offense. But he also made that comment about I think the fan that he was interacting with there made the comment about what it means to be a more talented versus a less talented team playing Random versus organized offense. Do you have an opinion on what a less talented team should do?
I guess if you are a little
Because I
less
think there's
talented,
arguments for both.
yeah, I guess one would be like if you're less talented, you may need more like organization to take advantage of, if you've been scouting a team and you can like employ a specific game plan to try to give yourself a
Mm,
little bit of an edge, maybe set
right.
organization would help. And I think like, you can look at the stats and, points per possession on set plays versus, random plays. It may be hard to like watch the game and classify what's random and what's set. I mean, I think a lot of analysts are really good at doing that. And, you can recognize these patterns with set plays and look at it and say, this is a set play or it's a sideline out of bounds or baseline out of bounds, whatever, that's a set play. But so from that standpoint, maybe a less talented team needs more organization because it's just like you have less to fall back on instinctually.
Yeah, I think it depends on whether the talent is athleticism or skill, where the gap
Right.
is, right? I
Right.
think that you could make an argument that if you're at an athleticism disadvantage, but you're at a skill either advantage or you're even, then playing random makes a lot more sense because everybody on the floor knows how to read and react and can do different things at different parts of the floor. And because you're at an athleticism disadvantage, you have to find other ways to like catch the defense off guard. But maybe if you're like a more athletic team, but you're at a skill disadvantage, you have to. So, for example, this is maybe what I would actually consider the Nuggets to be, right? Where I wouldn't say they're at a skill or athleticism disadvantage, but certain players
Yeah.
are kind of more inclined to one or the other. And so if you're more athletic, but you're more limited in your skill set, maybe um, you have to uh, take part in certain roles of the offense and not others. So a more read and react heavy offense would maybe put you at a disadvantage because you couldn't do every single thing that, like more talented or more skilled players could in different parts of the floor. I think it's an interesting discussion because it kind of gets to the heart of what is it that makes the game like to me the beautiful game is the game that makes basketball like easy, right? The highlight like crazy isolation plays where guys are making really tough shots, like those are great. But I think even Kevin Durant when he's referring to like the beauty of the game there getting in that flow state and all of that is when everybody's in a rhythm and everything just looks easy for everyone on the floor. I think it depends on the players, actually. I think it depends on your personnel. And I don't know that that means that you have to be more or less talented to prefer one style or the other. I think it just depends on what is it that you should do to maximize everybody's skill sets. Generally speaking, I would say if you're less skilled slash less talented, you probably need set plays
Right. If you're less
because
skilled
you
and
need
athletic.
something to help organize you,
Yeah, I
right?
mean, I think it's hard to get a like full grip on the game either way. Like I think it would be almost impossible to like every possession you're calling out set play. I mean, you can have your playbook and, go down and call a set play, but oh
Tell
man, it's
that to
just
Jamal Mosley, who walks up and down the court every possession to tell the
to
Orlando
try and do
Magic what
that.
they should run. Otherwise, they're going to turn the ball over in transition.
I think you just
Great
like
example of this, actually.
you need both for sure. It's just a matter of the situation and yeah, like you said, the players and the team and it's playoffs versus regular season. Obviously, you may be doing more of your base sets in the regular season, obviously. So this was kind of like why we wanted to watch the Olympics is some of this discussion, and I just didn't think we'd be getting it from Kevin Durant and
Yeah,
random
on
fans.
Twitter.
But I guess I should have
Maybe we
expected
should have
that.
expected it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also don't know if he means like aesthetically from the outside watching the game or if he means it's beautiful
Or like from
playing
the
the
player
game. He's a
perspective,
player.
right?
Maybe he means both.
And he doesn't like running sets. And I don't know who does, right? You gotta like remember stuff, you gotta do certain things, all of this. And players aren't brought up doing these things when they go through like the AAU circuit. I wonder if different players that learned basketball different ways would feel differently about this question. Like, do you prefer when you run, lots of set plays? I will say though, when he makes the comment at the very beginning of this, that was something like, that's like, he was comparing it to running a football play, and he said that that's not what the beauty of the game is. But I think unless he's playing like talking specifically from the player perspective, like I hope he's not talking for fans or the audience because I think that different people find different aspects of the game to be beautiful or like the most beautiful, their favorite part of the game, right? Some people love those like tough highlight shots, and that's like their favorite part of the game. And other people are like elated when you see just like a nice like 5-on-3 fast break or whatever, and somebody gets an easy shot because there was just lots of passing or whatever it is. And I actually think that some people, particularly the nerds, love a good ATO, and they're just like, oh my gosh, this will result in a beautiful shot every time because there's only so much you can do to guard this set or whatever it is from the fan perspective, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that was perhaps a little bit dismissive if he is speaking from the fan perspective, and like you said, he might just be speaking from like, oh, for as a player, there's like what makes the game beautiful is not running after timeouts or whatever. I think fans find different parts of basketball to be, make them feel elated.
It's funny too because I think one of the biggest plays that was being pointed out with Kevin Durant's game against Serbia was one particular play where Anthony Edwards like did this 45 cut, and
Right.
then the defender went with him instead of staying with Durant, which gave him an open three on the weak side. So it's like kind of
I
funny
was like,
that
how did Kevin Durant get open?
yeah,
Like,
it's like
well, it's because you had to go help on that cut.
yeah, you're making these tough,
Otherwise, you were giving up a layup.
the defenders are making these tough decisions. The USA has so many threats. And it's funny, Kevin Durant being like the beautiful game, the randomness, and it's like that was a set play that got him a wide open shot, and then he was like in rhythm. He could pull up just from anywhere after that, and he was like perfectly fine and comfortable. So I don't know. It's
and I
funny.
think it's funny that because he hasn't, like, teams that he's been on haven't really played like the beautiful game really since he left Golden State.
Yeah, I know, right?
5 years ago. Because he left after 2019. So,
It's true.
there's that.
He's on the search. He's a nomad. He's searching for the beautiful ball.
Yeah, I hope Kevin Durant gets to play a little bit of the kind of basketball that he claims to love so much, because he hasn't really been doing that in the NBA for the last few years.
Well, maybe like these players like Evan Fournier and Durant and people playing in FIBA and the Olympics right now bring some of that back with them in the NBA, because we talked last episode with Voya about how playing some time with your national team in a tournament like this can really improve your game in the NBA next season. So we'll see if any of that carries over.
All right. So you guys should definitely follow us on Instagram, because I am starting to post more show clips and updates there as well. But yeah, the Olympics are like, they go by pretty quickly. I think the bronze and gold medal games are on the 10th, so that's in 10 days. This was a good episode.
Yes, fun discussion.
Don't you think so?
Yeah.
Don't you think so, Will?
If you think so listening, then please like the video now.
Oh, yeah, you guys get to decide if it was good. Yes, but please remember to like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, all the things on YouTube. We're on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. If you're listening there, you probably already know that. We're also on TikTok. What's in a game NBA, with like periods in between each word. I haven't posted anything there yet, but I'm working on it, okay? And always remember that winning is fun and losing sucks.